Hi, here we are again, Telltale Books. I'm Greg,
I'm Emily.
and we're back to talk about another story, this time a short story that we read.
Really short.
Really short. Sometimes we like that because we have busy lives and, jobs and
Yes.
all kinds of stuff to do, and sometimes it's hard to fit a lot of novels into our schedule. So we like short stories. I've always loved short stories, though, because it,
Mm-hmm.
it is a less of a commitment than, say, a 1,200-page fantasy novel or something like War and Peace. It is
Or a
something you can
50
quickly,
book series.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and so you can just sit down, read in one sitting, and move on, and get something out of it. I really like that. Um, so today, anyway, we're talking about a story called Zen by a science fiction author named Jerome Bixby, who probably isn't all that well known anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but he should be. He's of the same generation as Richard Matheson. In a lot of ways, there are similarities. The two of them got started writing regular stories and books, and they both went and got involved in Hollywood in the 1950s. And from then on, they wrote a lot of screenplays and such, and that's where they both really made their fame.
Mm-hmm.
But Richard Matheson became very famous with uh, things like I Am Legend, The Shrinking Man,
Mm-hmm.
Hell House, um, What Dreams May Come
Yeah.
was another of his.
Mm-hmm.
Steel was one of his. Jerome Bixby is a little less well known, especially because he's a little more behind the scenes of things. His greatest movie credits, I think one of the first ones was It, the Terror from Beyond Space,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really a B science fiction movie in the 50s, but it was a major influence on the movie Alien.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Jerome Bixby was one of the collaborators on the screenplay for Fantastic Voyage, which is less known because, of course, Isaac Asimov wrote the novelization, and so a lot of times people think Asimov wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
No, he didn't. He just wrote the novelization after the fact. Jerome Bixby and one other guy, I forget his name, wrote the screenplay for Fantastic Voyage, which is one of the best science fiction movies of the 1960s. And then more recently, one of his screenplays was turned into a movie called The Man from Earth. So Jerome Bixby has a long association with Hollywood and science fiction, and with the science fiction magazines in the 1950s. He published in Galaxy magazine and
Mm-hmm.
many other magazines in the 1950s. And by far, his most famous story um, is called It's a Good Life, which was made into an episode of The Twilight Zone, and is probably Bixby's biggest claim to fame, because everybody, even if you've never heard of Bixby, you've probably heard of that episode of The Twilight Zone about this kid who has extremely advanced mind powers, and everybody in the town is afraid of him. It's really as far as I can tell, the first story to deal with that theme. Later stories were like The Midwich Cuckoos, which was filmed as Village of the Damned, dealing with children that had mind powers, and all the adults were afraid of them. That became a regular trope in science fiction after that. But I think, at least I'm not aware of anybody before that wrote that kind of a story in a horror vein. So Bixby pioneered the trope, I think, and this that story is brilliant. Zen is one of his less well-known stories. It's a good story,
It's cute.
maybe not as good as It's a Good Life.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I don't know. I'll let you do the synopsis.
Okay. So yeah, the synopsis is basically this scientific team is exploring this planet that had once had life on it, and one of the explorers encounters a female of this species who's the last of her kind, so she thinks. But they had actually found on a previous exhibition, or expedition, I should say, uh, a male from this very same species. So they decide to introduce the two to one another, and so they kind of introduce them, and they're like, you know what, we're gonna leave them for 6 months, see if they start to, to repopulate their planet or whatever, and they're sitting there being like really very. It is. Craig and I were talking before, and he's like, it's a very 1950s thing where it's like, yeah, we're gonna leave them alone. Do you think they think that what if they don't like each other? And one of the guys like, if you've not seen one of your kind for a long time and you suddenly encounter the opposite sex, yeah, I'm sure they look pretty dang good just about then. So I kind of chuckled at that because I was like, yeah, because they were also making remarks like, why do you think homely women try to get into the space program after the uh, the astronauts come back after 2 years of being out in space? And I was like, yeah. You're a jerk. Anyway, so
But nobody would have batted an eye at that.
no, honestly, back in the
1953.
day, it wouldn't. Everybody would. I still laughed. I still thought it was very funny, even though it's an old kind of misogynistic thing. It was very humorous because you're like, well, I mean, is he really that wrong? Not really. There's stereotypes for a reason.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so they come back after 6 months to find that now there are 12,000 inhabitants on this planet, and they suddenly become concerned that if they can repopulate at that rate, that they could overwhelm humanity very quickly. And that's how the story ends, where there's this one line of suspicion where it's like, they could overwhelm humanity pretty quickly at that rate.
Mm-hmm.
Done. So
And
you're like, ooh.
this story is very typical of Herbert Gould's Galaxy magazine in the 1950s. He did publish a lot of these kinds of humorous stories with a twist ending, almost Twilight Zone-ish type stories, but in a light, the more humorous, lighter types of Twilight Zone stories, and that seems to be what he preferred. He did publish a lot of stories like that, and Jerome Bixby was very good at it. A number of his early stories are very similar to this, with the lighthearted story, kind of humorous with a twist ending.
I thought it was a really cute story too, because they really were trying hard to make sure that they got these two aliens together and communicated well and learned about their culture. Like the humans, because they had encountered the first alien they had met, the male character is that's who Zen is. His name is Zen, so that's why the story's called Zen. So they had learned his language and stuff, like basic stuff, in case they did find another of his kind. And so when they did find her, they could already speak very basic stuff to her. And she's like, how do you know all this? Like, how do you know how to say this? And the culture is just really interesting. They describe a little bit of the alien culture from what they learned from Zen. So, like, there's kind of this very anthropological kind of bit to it where you kind of get a little bit of background, which is probably a majority of the story. It is a very, very short one, but it was a really cute, fun kind of read. Like, I wouldn't call it the greatest piece of literature I ever read, but it was very nice to kind of like follow up some of the heavier things I've been reading with a little comedic story like this. And I really appreciated it for that. So yeah, I thought it was great entertainment. Really mild, very tame. So you could have kids read this one pretty easily.
Yeah.
So.
And like I said, I liked it. It's not Jerome Bixby's best. It's A Good Life is by far a much better story. But it's kind of typical of his work, and I think Jerome Bixby deserves to be better known. He did do a lot of great things in the genre, even though he didn't write a lot. They were good, and he did write one of the most anthologized and most famous stories of the 1950s. And he went on to write screenplays for some of the best movies. And so his ability and accomplishments kind of match what Richard Matheson did. So he should at least be, I think, as well known as Richard Matheson, and deserves to be, for one thing, he deserves to be in print a lot more. It's a little hard these days to find anything of him. I did find an ebook collection from Wildside Press, which was really good. That's where I got my copy of the story. Zen is on Project Gutenberg.
Yes.
A lot of his other work, though, is not that easy to come by. and he deserves a bit of a reassessment by the genre. He is an important writer.
Yeah, this is the first thing I've ever read by him. And I would agree with that just because, yes, maybe this isn't the best piece of literature I've ever read, but I can imagine something that he put a lot more time in, like a book or a novel or the screenplays even. Definitely worth reading because I really enjoyed his dialogue. I really enjoyed his POV, his point of view from the author or like the narrator standpoint. I thought was really well done, especially when you're like, how do you like get the impression of being an astronaut encountering this other life form, you know, that's completely foreign to you. Like I feel like he did a really nice job of that. So I can only imagine from what I read here and enjoyed, his work is probably way better if it's gotten a lot more substance to it. So I was pretty impressed.
I forgot to mention he wrote a couple of episodes of the original Star Trek.
Did he really?
Yes, he did.
Oh,
I forget the names
Star
of them,
Trek.
but yeah, Jerome Bixby was one of the original Star Trek, not any of the later ones.
Yeah, so definitely, like he's a pivotal person in science fiction, like classic science fiction. So yeah, I just came across it because the synopsis I read sounded really cute. I was like, oh, we could use some lighthearted stuff because we've got some heavier books we're reading right now. So I had kind of gone through and picked out some little lighter things that I thought would help us out, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. I liked it a lot.
But now I think you need to find It's a Good Life and read that one.
Okay, I'll have to.
It's a brilliant story.
I will have to. I'll also probably find the Twilight Zone episode for that too.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to find it. I don't think It's a Good Life is public domain, so I don't think you can just find it for free on the internet. You'd have to find an anthology that
we have the entire collection of Twilight Zone, so
then it's in there.
We'll have it.
And the Twilight Zone episode is pretty close to the story, so
okay, cool.
You won't be missing much of anything. So with that, we're done with this one and on to our next video. Hope you're enjoying the holiday seasons. We're recording this early, but by the time we put it up, it's going to be Christmas. And the next video following this is going to be the new year already. So I hope you're enjoying your holidays, and we'll come back and spend a little of your time watching our video when we post it on Fridays at 6 o'clock. I put it up, and it's there forever after that till YouTube kicks us out.
Because you can't get rid of what's on the internet.
Yeah, it's there forever.
So, yeah.
So stop in and check us out.
Yep, like, subscribe, comment if you've ever read Zen. If you find it and like it, let us know what you thought. Have a good one, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.